This is Forensic Talk with Jim Campbell, the inside story of the capture of the world's most wanted drug lord with the lawman who led the hunt down of El Chapo, a man responsible for as many as 13,000 deaths and countless number of drug addicts. Tonight on Forensic Talk, Andrew Hogan is the DEA, that's the Drug Enforcement Agency special agent who led the investigation and capture of El Chapo Guzman. He now works in the private sector. He lives at an undisclosed location, co-authors Douglas Century, and the book is Hunting El Chapo, the inside story of the American lawman who captured the world's most wanted drug lord. And joining now by Drew Hogan. You were on 60 Minutes a couple weeks ago. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thanks for having me.
And I want to tell you, the book, not only is it mesmerizing, I actually read it in one sitting on a Sunday about a week ago. You can't put it down. Let me ask you this first off. We start off with Dick Cheney almost. You're at an undisclosed location where you live. Are you living in fear at all?
No. You know, I mean, I was one of numerous U.S. and Mexican officials that were on this capture operation, and the investigation. It was really a team effort. So, you know, I've got to watch my back the same way, just as everybody else does, whether I tell the story or I don't. It's just kind of the way that I live my life. I call it street cop mode, and it's been kind of ingrained in me since I was 21 years old. I first became a deputy sheriff.
Are you? Do you feel? I mean, obviously, the folks in the drug narcos knew who you were, and they certainly know your lead role now with the book out. Would you be subject to somebody they'd want to assassinate? I mean, Guzman, I guess, is no longer running stuff out of the jail that he's in. But what do you think?
No, I don't think so. You know, I mean, it's you know, Chapo's in the place that he needs to be in, right? In the United States, locked up with essentially no contact with the outside world, you know, other than his attorney for the time being. And I think the judge is being very fair, but very firm with him, and that's for good reason, because he's always one step ahead. He's always one step ahead.
Do you buy the stories? Maybe it's his wife that's trying that he's, you know, he's really going down mentally there, and hallucinations, depression, whatever.
Oh, I can't say for sure, but you know, I mean, if you were locked up in 23-hour isolation, you know, you may have some issues as well. So, I can't say for sure.
At one time, did you think would he have been more powerful than the president of Mexico?
I mean, no, he was, you know, certainly in his area of reign, you know, in which he controlled everyone in kind of the lawless land of Sinaloa, and then his stronghold in Culiacan. He had a lot of power, and that was due to a lot of bribery and corruption and payoffs, kind of at every level.
Is corruption the number one underlying issue?
Oh, I think that's it's a big part of it, certainly. You know, with drug enforcement down there, but you know, there's also people in Mexico that believe in the common good. Mm-hmm. So there's you know, in Samar, the Mexican Marines are these types of patriots who are very proud of their country and want to do the right thing, and you know, want to pair up with us and, you know, share intelligence, trust one another, cooperate with one another, and get things done. And I think this is a prime example of what can be accomplished when two countries really come together and do that. I mean, we accomplished something that most thought was impossible just by working together.
We're going to get into that in just a sec. Tell the folks, who is El Chapo, his name, personality. I didn't realize he started off selling oranges.
Yeah, so he was the most powerful drug kingpin in the world, the head of the Sinaloa cartel, public enemy number one, and a Forbes billionaire, and one of the most listed as previously as one of the most powerful men in the world.
Give us his whole name.
Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman Loera.
The The next thing that blew me away is, and I don't know that most of us have realized this, the scale of what he was doing. Give us some of the numbers, the cash that was moving through, the amount of drugs. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak for the investigations that I led and was involved in. We were moving millions of dollars at a time in ton quantities of cocaine, and that's what we were seeing. When we were targeting him, ton quantities coming out of all the source countries, of course, Colombia, Ecuador, up through Mexico, in the United States, and then into Canada as well.
How do you money launder hundreds of millions at a time?
Yeah, it's tough to do. I mean, that's kind of one of their biggest issues is cleaning their money, and there's multiple avenues that they can do, and I mean they're just about as ingenious with money laundering methods as they are with drug smuggling methods. Whether it's bulk cash delivered down south to Mexico across the border, or laundering through financial institutions and such.
On the human side of it, is that 13,000 number you think accurate? Deaths that he might be responsible for in some way or another?
I mean, I certainly can't say that he's responsible for that number. I think he gets attributed to that due to him being the leader of the cartel, and what charges the United States has on him for murder. I don't exactly know. So
I like in the book where he's captured. And somebody says to him, you've killed 13,000 people. And he looked stunned and said, no, it's only about 2,000, as if that's like an all right number, 2,000.
Yeah, I had heard that statement. That was hearsay, of course. But yeah, pretty incredible if he actually said that.
Was sex his Achilles heel?
Oh, I think so. He was the ultimate ladies' man. When he wasn't running the day-to-day of his drug trafficking organization, he was entertaining numerous ladies. So I know he joked at one point during our investigation on how women would be his ultimate demise, and it necessarily wasn't in the capture of 2014, but it may have gotten him into some issues there with his meeting with Tito Castillo and Sean Penn.
Yeah. One of the biggest surprises to me was that you go down there and there was no task force focus on just getting El Chapo organizationally.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of federal law enforcement were targeting Chapo, but nobody really had a substantial case on his whereabouts. When my partner in the Southwest, who I introduced in the book as Task Force Officer Diego Contreras, when we kind of climbed the ladder of the Sinaloa cartel with our investigation, and the only one left to target is Chapo at the top, and we started doing our deconfliction efforts and found really that nobody had a substantial case on his whereabouts.
FBI, CIA, the Homeland Investigative Service, the ATF, the DEA are all working on this stuff down there. And is there a lot of just bureaucratic dysfunction amongst this?
No, I think the bigger thing was, there had been a lot of missions over the last decade to capture him, and it was always the same result. He would escape out the back door.
Yeah.
Minutes or hours later, and everyone would walk home and blame the Mexicans for corruption, and it was, you needed to do your homework, and that's what I felt when I first got to Mexico, is that, look, he's got 11 years of hard study on us. It's time to ramp it up and really understand his entire organization, not just him, but his inner infrastructure. And
yeah, you really
that's
brought
really how
you really brought the focus and also the coordination, I think, amongst these agencies. Now, another thing I was surprised about, and this has ended up being a little bit like Osama bin Laden, is he didn't really travel with a huge number of thousands of armed guards and everything, right? He's like almost hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, well, you think about it. I mean, if you're a wanted man and on the run, how many people are you going to tell your location? Right? So he's almost a prisoner in his own right with his own organization. He can't tell everybody where he's at. And he can't live the life of luxury like most do, and he's got to lay low, and that's exactly how he was living.
And in fact, that's the third thing that really surprised me was that this guy wasn't living in luxury houses at all.
No, they were very simple. That was surprising to me. They were all kind of built to the same construction. He had the same plastic tables and chairs in the kitchen and faux leather couches and maybe a picture or two hanging on the wall. But very basic. He lived a very, very simple life.
How did you now when you decide that you're gonna do this and you're gonna move to Mexico and everything? How did you get yourself comfortable that you could, blend in with Mexicans so well that you'd end up being trusted? And I know you had a partner originally was able to go in and sort of sucker these guys in and convince them that you guys could launder money and stuff like that. How did you pull all that off?
For me, it was really kind of falling in love and embracing the Mexican culture. When I first met Diego, and he introduced me kind of to that world and introduced me into the narco world through the narco corridos, and I began to start to understand and really have a kind of develop a love for that culture and have that understanding. So when I went into Mexico, it was I felt prepared.
You went into these bars in the southern U.S. before you went there, and the narcos they're almost celebrated. It sounds like the music and stuff. And the young narcos of this generation were almost flaunting it in public.
Certainly, I mean it would be kind of the equivalent in the U.S. of gangster rap in a way. I mean, so. Top narcos have been celebrated. Their exploits have been celebrated through these drug ballads that get played, by bands and other people pick up the music, and that filters into the United States as well. And it's kind of become its own subculture within the Mexican culture. These narco corridos.
Were you able to get so fluent in Spanish that you were able to blend in your mind?
No, I always joke. I learned just enough to be dangerous kind of on both sides. And I've really lost a lot of it now. But, just enough to get around and certainly dive into my investigation like I needed to. And that helped me. But it's... Yeah.
When you guys would try to infiltrate the organizations, and you could say, "Hey, we can launder the money for you." What's it like holding millions of dollars that you're actually handling, and as well as trying to make sure that they don't catch on to you? What's the feeling? Is it just is it like adrenaline rush or what?
No, not really. I mean, it was handling the quantity of money at any time was. It's almost like handling monopoly money. It felt fake to me. It didn't feel real, and that was kind of the mindset that I had throughout.
Drew, how complicit do the banks get in this in terms of knowing their customers and laundering all this money? I know HSBC in particular got in a lot of trouble for drug laundering, but it would seem to me that banks that are complicit in this really are bad guys.
I mean, look, these banks. I mean, there's hundreds of millions of dollars that run through these large banks every day. So, I mean, there needs to be proper safeguards put in place, which I think they have improved on over the last few years. I don't know where they stand today, but it's pretty difficult to detect.
all the different cartels, are they at war with each other, or do they just divide up the territory? And Sinaloa, when he was there, being the top one, is it? How does it look?
Well, I mean, Chapo's personal organization within the Sinaloa cartel was disrupted and really dismantled, and there's only a few key members left, which are his sons, who have their own organizations as well. But you've really seen kind of a collapse in with new cartels coming in and taking over that space, right? I mean, the Sinaloa cartel itself hasn't collapsed, certainly. I mean, because there's so many members strong, and there's other top narcos out there that have organizations just as large as Chapo's personal organization. But Chapo was, the one at the top, the shot caller, and the one that was most respected. And if there was an issue, that was large enough, it would rise to his level, and he would make the determination on what needed to happen. But you're seeing the Sinaloa cartel weakened right now, and others kind of coming in and taking their place.
We're talking with Andrew Hogan, who led law enforcement in the capture of El Chapo. And let's get to one more thing, and then in the next segment we'll get to how you guys crack the code. But tell folks, he escaped out the back door, as you said, in Cabo San Lucas, which is a really fancy resort area. And before we get that in the next segment to how you guys were successful, why did that fail? And every time they tried to go at them, what was the issue? Talk about exactly what happened there and why they failed to get him.
Well, I think they, first off, they were dealing with some technology issues, I think, up front, and they had made several raids initially where they came up with nothing, and they weren't actually even close to Chapo's house. And by that time, the Mexican Federal Police were the ones that they were using, and they were essentially sent home. And there was just a small crew left, and they ended up finding Chapo at one of three mansions in a cul-de-sac. And they didn't have that many resources when they went to hit the door again, and nobody was covering the back door. So,
what kind of guts?
Poor coordination.
What kind of goal does it take to set yourself up in Cabo San Lucas?
Well, that kind of opened the floodgates when Diego found his number there, as you'll read in the book. And really exposed Chapo and, showed us how vulnerable he was and how fast and light he was traveling. Everybody thought he was rolling around with 100 bodyguards and black armored Suburbans all over the place. And that wasn't the case. He was living very comfortably over in Cabo. And, that certainly helped me advance things once I got to Mexico, to know that he was that vulnerable.
In the final minute of this segment, you've got the federal police in Mexico, the Army, which is Sedena, the Attorney General's office, which is the PGR. They have a 5% solve rate of murders. Is in the guys I just named, is that just all corruption and controlled by the narcos?
Not necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of regular murders that take place just like in any other large city in the world. So, but I mean, corruption does pay. That is a factor, certainly.
You'll see the Forensic Talk with Jim Campbell, 1490 WGCH Greenwich. We will be back with the hunt for El Chapo in our second segment. From Philly to Fresno, Brooklyn to Boston, Data Cable Superstars has the best prices on installation of Cat 5 and Cat 6 wiring for cameras, computers, phone, and data, specializing in off-peak installs as to not interrupt your workflow. If this is an I need it done yesterday situation, then it's time to call Data Cable Superstars at 203-942-1427 or go to datacablesuperstars.com. That's Data Cable Superstars, all one word, .com. Data Cable Superstars, where estimates and big ideas are always free. And we're back with Andrew Hogan, the author of Hunting El Chapo, the inside story of the American lawman who captured the world's most wanted drug lord. And, of course, that was El Chapo, which is Shorty. Not much, kind of a weird nickname for such a scary guy. Okay, now you moved to Mexico now. Tell us, just before we get into details, what a day was like, how you organized yourself to make this happen, and were you afraid for your family? I mean, I know you changed your route driving back and forth from the office, etc. Go ahead.
Yeah, living in Mexico is certainly not like living in the United States, but my family and I really enjoy it. We love the city and what it had to offer, and love the people, and again the culture and the street food there was just incredible. So to take all that in, and we were pretty fortunate to have that opportunity. But how it started with the case, I was coming from the States with a heavy background, in the investigations that Diego and I had started. And it was just kind of a continuance of that. And I was focused on several members surrounding Chapo, to include some of his key pilots, and ended up running into Homeland Security investigation agents, a team of them up in the United States that were actually looking at the same pilots as well. And we paired up and began sharing intelligence and valuing it back and forth, and started to infiltrate Chapo's sophisticated communication structure, and to determine, the day-to-day operations of his organization, and determine the phone that was always next to him, where we could ping that and start to build a pattern of life over the course of really 8 months. And once we had his location ironclad, it was we were ready to walk it over across the street to the Mexican Marines, and they wanted him just as badly as we did, of course. So,
okay, so now take us through. To me, this key thing of this cracking of the communications network, which is called understanding the mirror structure. Tell people what that means.
Yeah, so essentially, Chapo was insulating himself from all other members of his organization by layering communications. So he would have multiple people between him and, say, his ground operator in Colombia, who would basically forward messages through the intermediaries, and then on up to Chapo, and down from Chapo to the ground operator. So it was really determining how many layers were between us and him, and it took some time, but we were able to figure it out.
Okay, so tell us how it works. These guys are all using BlackBerries, and what does the PIN number mean versus then pinging against the phone number associated with it? Just trying to understand exactly how you guys broke this code.
Yeah, I mean, the PIN number is particular to a certain device, and then the phone number, is particular to a SIM card. We were able to ping the phone number, multiple phones over the course of many months, to determine kind of his daily movements, and we were trying to find a location to get him out of Culiacan, out of its stronghold, so we could take him without a gun battle.
The PIN number, you have to have access to getting to the SIM card, or how does it?
Yeah, I mean, you can start with either one. And go from there. Now,
you have to get wiretapping approvals to do this?
Yes, this was all done judicially through the team at HSI in the United States. that were writing wire affidavits and on all the phones that we needed to be up on.
And what's happening is each layer is essentially retyping to the layer up the pyramid?
Correct.
And these guys discard these things amazingly fast. I mean, they drop these BlackBerries like, almost if the new guy at the top changes, they put in new BlackBerries. How were you able to keep finding them? And obviously, I would assume that the phone numbers are completely changing,
Yeah, I mean, there's always remnants left over. There's hundreds of people in his organization, and we were always on to somebody. So it wasn't a complete. We were never completely in the dark.
So if they had literally had the entire network discard their phones regularly, you would not have been able to easily to get back into it. Is that then right?
Yeah, in a sense, but there's just so many people within the organization
that would never happen. Yeah, because I couldn't figure out how these guys would drop the phones and you'd be back at the second tier. You'd be back in, very quickly figuring out who they were, and I didn't quite figure out how you were able to do that so quickly if they're throwing the damn phones out every day.
Right. No, there's still others that are on the periphery that were hanging around.
So you had to literally focus on reading the texts, messages that were intercepted for hours on end, right?
Yes, absolutely. Spent countless months reading and rereading and diving into the language and really trying to decipher where he was at. Now,
how did you got to the point you could figure out through the code words, et cetera, who his sons were? I think as a father-in-law link, and this is in, I guess, the tier above the bottom tier. Were you able to penetrate down to who the people were? And obviously the sons are going to be more important than other guys.
Yeah, really from the work done of previous agents throughout the decades, figuring out who the people were within the organization from a long time ago up to present, and I had done a lot of that work in my time back in the United States, and it was focusing on the details really, where not a whole lot of people were paying attention to, and that's where it really mattered.
That's where it really mattered.
Not just nicknames, not just phone numbers, and you had to live kind of in that, and that was my forte. That's what I like to do, and I know it was tedious to most people, and people would get frustrated with it, and but that's kind of where I thrived.
It was clear this whole breaking the mirror structure was the key to the. What did you learn to understand about how El Chapo's pattern of life? How he managed, and it was hands-on and moved around. What did you end up figuring out about his whole management style?
That he really didn't move as often as I thought he would. He spent, probably 90% of his time at one particular safe house. It was like his favorite, and then we'd see him leave the city from time to time or move to another safe house every now and again. But, eventually we determined that he was coming out south of the city to a place that I nicknamed Duck Dynasty. It was an old duck hunting camp with a couple palapas or shacks on the property, and we had determined that he was building a house there and a pool, and he was coming down there to relax, and it gave us kind of our perfect hit location. So
he wouldn't have been able to escape that. That did like a great place, right? I mean, it was way out in the middle of nowhere. You would have been able to surround him, right?
Yeah, he would have been surrounded. I mean, it was a simultaneous air and ground assault, and he would have been done relatively quickly, safely, and but he didn't come down.
Were you surprised at
strategy?
Were you surprised at how much into the minutiae Chapo was of running the stuff day to day?
I was. It was, the parallels to how I worked and kind of how he worked was really really interesting. I didn't know that he would care about the price of jet fuel for his aircraft, or how many pesos he was paying a lookout, but he had it down. He wanted to know, every single piece, every single movement. And, I think that's how he was able to operate for so long and be that successful.
Was it a mistake that he didn't move around more?
He was still pretty elusive, as he had always been. But he had, like I said, he was always one step ahead, always thinking one step ahead. So
Yeah.
he had his tunnels if anything were to go awry.
Yeah, those tunnels were pretty impressive. Those tunnels with hydraulics and everything. He had two guys in that top tier with him who sort of seemed to rotate shifts. How were you able to figure out that they were actually in the room with him?
Really, just through the phone analysis. And pairing that up with what we were seeing coming across the wire, and he had a particular courier that would pick up food or women or whomever and bring it over to the safe house, and was able to corroborate, the courier meeting or over at the same place that the secretary was pinging. The secretary that was standing right next to Chapo was pinging. So did a lot of that corroboration to determine that's where he was at.
You were even able to determine when Chapo himself was, typing in the text, because I guess his spelling was so bad.
Yeah, it was. You could tell when he would grab the device, and that would be every so often he would pick it up, whether his secretary would run off to the bathroom or go do something. I don't know, but it would. We could definitely tell, certainly.
All right, tell us now. So you guys have spent all this time getting the pinging so close that he's in one of a few. I guess he's in which block he's in Sinaloa, in that town there. Tell us how you put together the plan to go in there with the Mexican Marines and the story.
Yeah, I mean, the Marines started moving resources up into Sinaloa, and we had 4 helicopters on standby, ready to go. And we were waiting for him to come down to this Duck Dynasty location, and he didn't. So we had to make another move, and we determined that would be to move into enemy territory and go root him out of his stronghold in Culiacan. So that's what we did. And the ground team went in and tried to locate the door of his safe house that he was at, and we ended up doing that. And the Marines, when they hit the location, Chapo escaped down a tunnel underneath the bathtub, and he was gone.
You went to all 5 safe houses there, right? Were they all within a couple blocks, or?
Yeah, they were probably within a half-mile radius of one another, and each one had a tunnel underneath the bathtub that was connected to the sewer system that you could move freely about underground.
And they were pretty sophisticated tunnels, right?
Yeah, they were. I mean, he was known as kind of the tunnel king. They were the same types of tunnels that were up at the U.S.-Mexico border. The same one that was found under his prison when he escaped. He had one kind of chief tunnel builder that I think built all his tunnels and all of his safe houses.
You guys, so you ended up basically building a camp in his own houses right there. What did the inside of El Chapo's house look like?
Yeah, we really had no choice. We didn't have anywhere to stay. It's not like we could go down the street and rent a hotel room. So we took over all of his houses and started. We slept in his beds and ate the food out of his refrigerator and kind of survived those 4 days, 3 or 4 days that we were in Culiacan. Now
it seemed that the launch of going into the attacks was a little bit more haphazard than I would have expected. I mean, at one point, you and the other American guy are like almost without weapons, without anybody around you, right?
Yeah, it was. We had gone over to the ground. My partner Brady and I, who was an HSI agent. When we went over to meet with the Marines, and initially when this whole thing started, we thought we were going to re-strategize, and we didn't. You're right. We didn't have any guns with us. We didn't have anything with us, and we just had to improvise. We couldn't leave. Once we got there, we determined that we needed to stay with the Marines hand in hand, and he kind of guided them along, and that's the way it worked out best. We had the intelligence, and the Marines were the ones that could hit the door. So
what I find unbelievable too is that there are so many leaks. The Marines have the best reputation, you say, but even then there were leaks such that Chapo is getting real-time information as to where you guys are at any moment, which of course lets him go out the back door.
Yeah, that was pretty eerie to read when those first came across, and as you'll see in the book, we confronted the Admiral right away, and he admitted that he knew that he had leaks within his organization, and but what really saved us was Chapo never knew that we were coming for him. He knew that we were launching up for something big, but
he
never knew
that
we were coming for him, and that was an attribute to the Marines staying tight with the information. So.
Okay, tell us now how you ended up getting him in a hotel in Mazatlan. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Tell us how you got him.
Yeah, after he escaped in Culiacan through the tunnel, he had gone down to Mazatlan, and we had confirmed and corroborated that. And then we moved down with a covert team, actually used his armored vehicles, dressed in plain clothes, and made our covert approach down to the south and put together the raid plan with the Marines there, and ended up hitting the door and finding him in room 401 of Hotel Miramar, as we called it.
Did you? What did you say to? When did you confront Chapo yourself, and what did you say to him?
Yeah, as the Marines were inside hitting the door, I was outside, kind of watching the lights come on in the windows of the hotel, and I was really worried about our perimeter. I was worried about him escaping us again, and I was going to physically jog the perimeter to make sure that we were solid. And when I heard excited radio chatter, they had gotten the target, and I ran up and jumped into my vehicle and drove it down into the underground parking garage where they had taken him and brought him down an elevator from his room. And I got out of my car. It was really dark, and I was wearing camouflage, and actually was wearing Chapo's black ball cap that I had taken from one of his safe houses up in Culiacan, and I just happened to be wearing it for the raid, and I'm in a black ski mask, and they had just stood him up, and I ran right over to him, jumped into his face. We locked eyes for a second, and I yelled the first thing that came to my mind, and that was, "What's up, Chapo?"
Great way to end the segment. Did he respond at all?
He didn't. I think he was in shock. From being captured. It was very early in the morning, and they woke him up, and there was so many people around there. He wasn't quite sure what was going on.
And you also walked away with his pistol with his initials JGL on it. You're listening to Forensic Talk with Jim Campbell. Final segment coming right up. And we're talking with Andrew Hogan, DEA special agent at the time, who got El Chapo, as we just heard in the last segment. By the way, where is his pistol now that you had with the initials?
I don't exactly know where it went. I heard from somebody that it was gifted to the president of Mexico, and it's in his museum, but I don't know that for sure.
Now, I was surprised, by the way, that when you guys have captured him at the Hotel Miramar, you had no exit strategy to get him anywhere, right? And here, this is a guy known to escape and have his guys come in. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We were so laser focused on the capture that we hadn't even planned to take him down to Mexico City. But there was hundreds of Marines around there, and it was very easy for them to take him out safely and securely, and they ended up putting him on it.
And who drove El Chapo?
The Marines took him out of my vehicle, and he was driven to a helicopter and then flown to a local military base there. And then he was later flown to Mexico City.
The other thing I didn't mention back then, but when you guys went into that neighborhood, the five houses where he actually was 90% of the time, that was no man's land in terms of any law enforcement in that area because the police were all corrupt. Nobody went in there. I mean, what gave you guys the courage to even go in there to think that you'd survive in a neighborhood that? I mean, I don't think Chapo even expected that law enforcement would come into his home territory, right?
Yeah, really, we had no choice. You know, this whole story is about relentless, is about never giving up, and that's the way we all operated. And you know, it was just the next move that we took, and you know, we were ready. We were ready for a gunfight to happen around every corner, and it didn't. I think we took that city by surprise, and because nobody from the outside had been there, everybody was in shock and started scrambling and running for cover and hiding. And Samar took control of that city immediately, where we were moving so fast through it that Chapo was getting intelligence reports that were 2 hours stale.
Wow. What made you think, as you look back, what made you confident that you could get him when he was such an untouchable prior?
You know, it was breaking it down to the basics, right? I mean, this guy was standing on the same soil, breathing the same air that I was. You know, he's on planet Earth, and it's not impossible. And for me, it was never about Chapo. It was never about the man himself. I never became attached to, you know, or distracted by kind of the myth and the legend and the hype around him. It was breaking it down to, you know, his location, and that's all I really cared about. It was single-minded focus on that one thing and not being distracted by everything else that was happening around him.
Impressive. Now, who is running, and what's the status of the Sinaloa cartel now? And are these narco groups? Is it like ISIS? You behead the guy and they just regrow again?
Yeah, I mean that happens in a way. You know, nobody's gonna rise to the level that Chapo was at, and I think that's, you know, you're seeing some of the effects from that, some of the infighting, and you know, when a new cartel comes in, of course. But you know, this is what we need to be doing as the United States government, as the Mexican government, working hand in hand together, cooperating, sharing intelligence as one team. And you know, this story is really a blueprint for that, to show how successful you can be and how two countries can come together and accomplish something, you know, most thought was impossible.
Impressive. Now, what happens to you after this? You're on this adrenaline surge, intense focus. You get him. Is it a little bit depressing afterwards, or PTSD, or you don't know what to do? How does and what did you feel like after it happened?
Yeah, I don't exactly know what it was, but I was expecting to feel euphoric after the capture, to, you know, do cartwheels down the hall of the embassy, and it was the exact opposite. I felt like a zombie. I had a huge void in me, and you know, you work for so long and so hard at one particular goal, and then you achieve that goal, and it's gone. You're essentially left with nothing. And for me, like I said, it was never about Chapo. It was about the hunt. It was about the challenge, and I really did some self-reflection, and I recognized that, you know, I need a new hunt. I need a new challenge, and there was no one to go after that was higher than Chapo Guzman there at DEA. So it was time to move on to the next journey. Have you found the next hunt? I have. Yeah, I mean, really, telling this story has been a pretty incredible journey. You know, and releasing it to the world and sharing it with the world, because it's an success story. It's about teamwork and cooperation. It's not just about me, but how we can all come together and work towards one common goal to be successful. So it really is. It is a great story of how you put the teams together in a very hostile environment where a lot of people don't trust each other most of the time, even within the U.S. government. Would you have any recommendations on the war on drugs, or if there was a legalization, would it take the profit out of it, or what, in terms of a big picture, how would you try and fix things? We've got to continue the fight, and you take Colombia, for example, the country of Colombia and Medellin, that once was the stronghold of Pablo Escobar and his reign
Yes.
back in the 1990s. And you look at Colombia today, right? And it's turning into a tourist destination. You can go walk the streets of Medellin right now. And that's because the Colombian government has embraced the United States in a cooperation, and they work together. I mean, you see it every day with DEA and, the local counterparts there in country. And they've got an incredible drug enforcement program. And that's because they've continued to fight and they've continued to apply the resources necessary. And I think, the same thing can happen in Mexico, and it can be done.
This Andrew Hogan coordinated approach that you put together down there, you've left now. Have they grafted your approach onto the way they do business there, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I was simply following DEA's mission, and that was to disrupt and dismantle drug trafficking organizations. That's what they do. It's single mission. The experts are out there. They know what to do. And I think they're doing it, and we'll probably see success here in the future if they continue along those lines.
Let me ask you this. I don't want to get into politics or anything, but the proposal of the president to build a wall, right, on the border, is that going to work against a vision of yours, such as that we team up with the Mexican government? Is it going to be counterproductive? Do you have thoughts on it?
Do we have immigration issues? I think certainly, but I'm really not the expert to say if the wall is going to work or not. That wasn't my expertise, in my investigations. So, leave that up to the Border Patrol or Customs and Border Protection or HSI.
Well, it's a really inspirational book because obviously if you can show you can take this stuff down, maybe Mexico can become like a Colombia. And it's also a mesmerizing read. You're not going to be able to put it down as they narrow in on getting this guy. I want to thank Andrew Hogan. Hunting El Chapo, the inside story of the American lawman who captured the world's most wanted drug lord, is the name of the book. This is Forensic Talk with Jim Campbell. We'll see everybody next Monday night, 6 p.m. for another edition of Forensic Talk with Jim Campbell.
Money, 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 money. You gotta have it. When you need it, what do? If you don't have a rich uncle, call Lending Tree. With us, hundreds of banks compete for your business, so you'll get loans with competitive interest rates, and in some cases, with no closing costs. So here's the deal. If you need money, call us. Do you want to refinance your current loan? Are you 62 or older and interested in a reverse mortgage? Then call Lending Tree now. 888-794-1645, 888-794-1645. We've closed over $250 billion in loans. We know what we're doing and can help you. Call right now for a free quote. 888-794-1645, 888-794-1645, 888-794-1645. That's 888-794-1645. NMLS number 1136.